Okay, so we're ready to start the background. So I have fresh color. I've got my Nickel Azo Yellow, my PY150, my Quinacridone Rose, PV19, and my Phthalo Blue Red Shade, PB156. So they're all fresh. And so what I want to do is, and then, believe it or not, I have run out of, and here I am saying that nobody runs out of saran wrap. I didn't have any saran wrap. So I went ahead and covered the center with just some regular masking tape. And I just made sure I went all the way into the area that I have the masking fluid. So that should be good enough. There is no way I'm taking water and going right across. I just don't want water to flip from my brush onto the center of the flower. Okay, so a couple of things to keep in mind about the water is we are going to put a lot of water on this paper. Your water should be soaking, and as soon as I get it all on, and I'm just going to keep turning. Now I am brushing across the masking fluid right there because those are just small areas. And I know it's completely covered because I checked. There were no pinholes. And just as I say that, might get a pinhole. Okay, all right, so, had a little hair off my brush. Now, when you're putting the water down, just let it flow off your brush. Don't press down hard and don't scrub. You want to try to not lift the paper fibers. Okay, so let's see how much water we actually got. Look, see how that water is just pouring? And you see how there's some areas where there was water, but it looked like the paper, it sunk into the paper quickly. That's because when your very first layer of water, sometimes the sizing can be a little uneven. So anywhere where there's not a lot of sizing, it will sink into the paper quickly. Like there's a few corners right up there where I'm seeing that. Okay, so, and again, I want lots of water. Why do I want a lot of water? Because I want this water to be sinking down into the paper. I want it to get into the middle of the 300-pound paper, because when I put, and we're going to start with yellow, when I put that color on the paper, I want it to immediately sink in. I don't want it to shoot across the paper. I want it to sink in so that it holds on to the color, so that as we add layers of color, we're not lifting anything. I can see one little area right here that I didn't hit with water. So make sure that you lean it and turn it all around. So that that water goes everywhere. So I'm going to hold it. See how you can see the water is pooling on the side. And now as I lean back that way, I can see that it's pooling. And now everywhere that I went and dropped extra water, all those areas that looked like the water had sunk in quickly, it's now staying nice and glossy. So this is what I want. I want nice, glossy water all over. And now I'm going to pick up just a little bit from the edge because I don't want that water rolling back onto my paper, because then it could cause a blossom later on. Okay, so let's get it right here. Okay, now what I'm going to do, and this is going to take a while, is, and on this first layer, you're going to see this in real time. As we build layers in this background, because it's got to get really dark, we'll probably do, I'm guessing 3 layers. I can cut out the part, the amount of time that it can take to get that water to sink into the paper. But on the first one, it takes a long time because you're breaking that barrier, and I want you to see how long it really takes. So that if it's not taking you a while to get that water to sink in, that means that you probably don't have enough water in the paper. You really should be seeing that water pooling in some of these areas, and you want to pick it up and you want to roll it around. Because in the end, what we want is we want the water sinking down into the middle of the paper, and then we want it to be nice and glossy on the top so that we have plenty of time to build our colors. Okay, so while that's sinking in, I'm going to take a very wet brush. I'm going to use a big brush. I'm going to use a number 10, and I'm going to bring some of this yellow over here. And I'm going to start with yellow. I keep pulling some of that color out. I don't want this too watery, so I'm going to show you on a sample of paper. I want it to look about like that. I want it to not look like that. I want plenty of yellow on that paper because we are going to be building some very, very dark values on this background. But I want to establish color on underneath so that we don't... There's a little bit up in the corner that got missed. Okay. So that we don't have a really flat gray. And even though we are using 3 colors to make our gray, sometimes, and sometimes you can mix your colors so well that the grays can just be really homogeneous, but we want to be able to see everything within our grays. We want to be able to see the yellows and the reds and the blues. And that's what's great about mixing your own colors, especially your grays and your browns and your burnt siennas, is, I found another little area where I missed some water, is they create harmony. Because you're sticking with these 3 colors, you're creating harmony throughout your painting. And this also means you have more control over the transparency of colors like your blacks, your grays, your burnt siennas. Most burnt siennas that you buy tend to be pretty opaque. So after a while, it can tend to start lifting and muddying your other colors. So that's important to keep in mind. That's why I like to mix all my own colors. Okay, now, see how the gloss is starting to settle down? The sheen is evening out. We've still got a lot of water down there, and I'm going to let that all move up. And in just a sec here, I will test it, and we're going to drop a little bit of color on, and we're going to see how that color looks. So I'm going to take a tiny brush. Believe it or not, I'm going to take my 0. And I'm going to drop a little bit. Let's drop some right in here. Now it is spreading out quite a bit. Let's see what happens if I drop some over here. Now it's staying a little bit where I put it. The water hasn't sunk all the way into the paper. So I'm going to give this another second. See how much that spread? I don't want it to do that. I want it to do this. So over in this area, this water needs to sink in just a little bit more. Whoop. Yeah, be careful how far you tip your paper too. And this is the difference between how your color should stay and color that's spread out too far. So there's definitely, the water is having a little bit harder time sinking in on this area. And I notice just a little bit of spots right along the edge that weren't quite sinking in all the way. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, now the sheen's starting to disappear. Okay, I think I'm good. I think I'm going to go ahead and pick up some color, and I'm going to start up in this top area, and look at that. Perfect. Color's nice and rich. Now, if you're that little mark, that was from that is a mistake that I should have been a little bit more careful of. It's just so annoying to me how arches and a lot of the companies, they imprint their their name, and sadly that's part of the paper that's really hard to use, but that should settle down and we most likely won't see that. Okay, so I'm mixing a little bit more of this thicker yellow, and let's go ahead and add it over in here. And now let's come down this way and see how it's staying where I put it now. That's how I know that it is really sunk in to the paper. Okay, a little bit more. Remember, and it's not going to be yellow. And actually, it's sunk in so well that it's not really spreading around a lot. So let's lift it up. Let's kind of move it around. I'm actually going to tap some water right there and right there. Just to get it to move a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to clean up the sides here. One of the reasons why I like to start with yellow on a very, very dark background, actually a lot of my paintings I start with yellow, is because it's very, very hard with a transparent color to get it to, so in other words, if there's not enough yellow later on, and I try to add it in after the fact that I've got all those dark values on there, we're not going to see it. It's going to be really hard to put in. It's only on lighter layers that works with. Okay, not bad. Okay, so now what we've got to do is we've got to get this dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my hair dryer, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start drying this. Now, when you dry a background, stay about 6 to 8 inches away. Use it low. Circulate. Make sure that you don't stay too long in one area. Otherwise, you'll cause a blossom from the areas that are still wet. They'll work its way into the dry areas. So put it on low and circulate very carefully. Try not to get too close to the surface, especially if you have masking fluid, because you don't want to cook the masking fluid into the paper. And then keep an eye at an angle and make sure that you don't have any areas that are really wet and areas that look like they're losing their sheen. If so, focus a little bit more on any areas that are wetter for a few extra seconds, and then just keep circulating around. Now you can see how I've got some nice dark areas and some nice lighter areas. So I think this is going to work out really well. All right, before we put the next layer of water on and the next color, what I want you to do is really feel your background. It should feel with the back of your fingers, and this is going to be a little hard because everything's covered, but it should feel warm. If it feels cool to the touch a little bit, and if it's not quite exactly flat, if you still feel with your finger, feels like it's a little bit still bouncy, then you're gonna need to dry it a little bit more. In fact, even though mine looks totally flat, I'm feeling some of the areas and it's still feeling a little cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna dry this some more. So you want to make sure it's completely dry. And I want to hammer this message home to you, because if it is not completely dry, what happens is that moisture that's in the inside of the paper, some of those previous layers can kind of bubble up and they can leave weird marks everywhere. If I wasn't using masking fluid, it can actually send these little frizzy little edges into wherever's not painted. So it's very important that it be completely dry. Like I said, mine still feels a little cool. So now I know it's not dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit it with the hairdryer a little bit longer. Okay, now I'm feeling everything again, and now it feels room temperature, so I know that it's completely dry. Okay, I'm back to my flat brush. Now, here's where the magic of transparent colors comes in. Look how I'm able to go over and none of this yellow is lifting. If I had have tried to do this with an opaque yellow, like a cadmium yellow, it would have immediately lifted. This time I'm going to try to be a little bit more careful about getting into the crevices. So this is definitely one instance where masking out, if you take the time to do a good job, can really help. If you do a bad job at masking, it actually just ends up making it miserable. So then you've got to try to clean up the lines. You know, and it's expected when you mask that you are going to have to clean up a little bit, but oh, a bad masking job is you're better off trying to paint around if you're not good at masking. Okay, so let's get this water moved over in this area. And now, every layer that every time you finish a layer and you add water, it's going to sink in quicker because you've opened up those paper fibers, and it's going to evaporate quicker because now you're filling up the spaces between the fibers. You're filling them up with color, with pigment. Okay, so what we're going to do on this layer, I'm just going to add blue. And this is also such a great way, starting with just one color. It helps you not have to be thinking so much about all your color choices that are going to go on your paper, even though we're only using 3 colors. Now imagine if you had a whole palette, and that's where people really struggle. You get those palettes with 30 plus colors, and it's very, very easy to get lost and not know what to do. What yellow do you use? What blues? What is this color? Is this color opaque? Is it transparent? Is it warm? Is it cool? You have all these things that you come across. So when you just have your 3 colors here, you can just think, do I want it yellow? Do I want it to lean red or blue? Do I need to add a little bit of the other color to cool it down a little bit or warm it up? That's it. Oh, there's a little area right up there I didn't get. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take a small brush. It's pretty much evened out, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of this watery blue, and let's just drop a little bit and see what it does. Perfect. It's spreading out a little bit, but I can move it around. So, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to take my number 10 again, and some of that red may move over there, and I'm okay with that because that'll give us kind of a purpley blue, because once we put the final color on, it's going to be a very muted, soft, smoky, bluish, reddish, grayish. Okay, so let's go ahead, but I want to do this first. I want to get some blue on first. Let's make that a little bit more watery. So we have some some more undertones. This way we'll have, let's get some more in there. We'll have the blues. We're going to have a little bit of the yellows. And this will also tone those yellows down a bit because it's the red shade version of phthalo blue instead of the green shade. You notice our colors are already very, very muted. Those greens are really, really muted. I need a bigger brush. I'm going to grab, this is my natural hair. So I've just got so many big areas. Okay, and I need to stir around some of my color a bit. See what happened when the red got mixed in there with it? Toned it down even more, and that's what you want. You want some variety in there. Okay, so it did it up in that area too. You don't have to go super heavy. We're just getting a nice toned base to start putting our dark colors on. See how all that color is running? Lots and lots of color running. So it's nice and wet. Everything's going to spread out nicely, except for areas where I didn't have any water. See right there? Okay, so and I can see another little area. And right there. Now, as these colors start blending, see how much working time I have too? Colors are all blending together nicely because there's plenty of water on the paper. If your colors aren't doing this, in fact, let me zoom out just a bit so you can really see these colors move. Look at right over here and see how it's pooling. That's what you want. If you don't have any movement in your paint, then that means you don't have enough water in your paper and your paints were not wet enough. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is try to lift some of that color off of your masking fluid so that it doesn't run back into the background. Uh-oh. And look what happened there. I hope that's covered. I had some leakage. But I think it's still on the masking fluid, so I think I'm all right there. Just gently lift it and roll it around. And then pretty soon, this is going to start really sinking in. See how mine is gradually, it's starting to sink in. It's a little bit heavy over in this area. And if you do find that and you're a little bit worried, what you can do is take the tip of your paper towel and just lift. If you feel like you've got way too much water, and that does happen on occasion, especially when you're doing these bigger backgrounds. Let's just pick that edge up right there. There's a bunch of water still on there. Okay. All right, so far so good. Now at this point, you can either stop and you can start drying it, as long as you pay attention to where all the white areas are. I lot of water on there. Let's definitely wick some of that up. But everywhere else I think is pretty good. See how the edge just wicks a little bit of that up. Okay, there's a little bit more. I want to spread down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hairdryer and I'm going to start drying it. Okay, you can see everything is really dry. The colors have toned down. I can feel with my hands, everything is completely flat. I can feel with my hands that it's warm, the same room temperature as everything else. There's no coolness anywhere. So now I feel like we can go ahead and put the darkest colors on the background now. So, and hopefully yours look something similar to this. You should have these really nice soft blends where it almost looks airbrushed. If you don't and it looks blotchy, that means that you didn't have enough water on your paper. It's really important that you get that water on there, let it sink in, and that you have that your colors are nice and watery too. Okay, so now one of the first things I want to do, in fact, I'm going to move this over a little bit so I don't splash. And I added some more water to my blue here. And I have a sample piece of paper, a little scrap. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing this blue. I'm just making sure that there's no chunks in there. And that can be hard to see because it's such a dark valued color. So that's about the consistency as it sits now. I'm going to add a little bit more color in here. And here's the thing. Here's what I used to do. I used to think, I'm going to get this, let's zoom in a little bit and zoom back out. It's a little bit out of focus. So I used to try to just get the darkest colors as I could on my backgrounds. And that was the worst thing I could do because things ended up drying unevenly and I got weird, splotchy textures on my paper. It would be lovely if all it would take would be one more layer to get those darkest values, but it's going to take this and probably one more. So I don't want to get this too dark, but I do want to make sure it's dark enough. And I think that's going to be okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of the red and we're going to add that in there and let's see what that does. Ooh, and look at that gorgeous dusky purple we've got. So that's pretty on its own. And if I thin it out, look at how that gets. So I want to try to get some of those areas around the flower to have kind of some dusky, lighter areas. Okay, but one thing that we need to do to tone it down and get it a little bit darker is a little bit of the yellow. So now let's throw some yellow in there. And let's see what happens to the color. Because now we're using the three colors and look at that. How beautiful that is now. It's dark and it's dusky, yet we can still see the blues. I'm going to actually add, and yeah, my colors are getting very messy, but once we're done with the background, we'll get everything cleaned up. Now let's see. Ooh, see, that's what happens when you have a chunk of color. So that's what happened by adding just a little bit of the red over here. So now we've got different areas, some that are more purple, lean more red. These lean more bluish and dusky with a tiny bit of that yellow in it. So I feel like I've got a couple of different areas going on here. Okay, in fact, let's just go ahead and mix in all that blue. Make sure we move it all around so I have some different areas on my palette. Okay, so I'm going to set that brush down and I'm going to move this out of the way. And let's move this back over. So now those colors are going to completely change and they're going to start looking something like that. Okay, so again, we're going to wet the surface, the paper. Be very gentle with your brush. I think I had a little bit of color on this brush, but that's okay. Okay. I'm just looking around and making sure every bit is covered. And I'm going to set that brush down. And let's clean off the edge. Okay, now let's move the water around. Oh, I found one little spot that I missed right there. You could also take a sprayer if you feel like there's areas that are just a little bit not as glossy. Just use your little mister. You can just mist more water on that way. Then of course you've got to clean up the edge. And I'm also making sure that I don't have too much water on my masking fluid. So I'm picking a little bit of that up. Okay, so nobody said backgrounds were easy. They're not as difficult as they can be if you use these methods. Okay. Get that brush back out. I'm going to turn this way. Just add some more water there. I feel like I didn't have enough. Okay. Now isn't that interesting? See how it's glossy, but the water is sinking in faster now because I'm on my third layer. This is one of the reasons why I'd say 99% of the time I do my backgrounds first, because if I mess this up, I can always start it over. But the amount of time it takes to put into the detail part, I would hate to put in hours of work on the foreground and then go and mess the background up. So there's trade-offs, and that you have to be careful when you're going around the edge, but I end up using those to my advantage. Okay, I'm gonna clean that brush off, and I'm gonna get my big Cheap Joe's natural hair brush. This is a number 12, and I'm gonna go ahead and pick up some of this color, and I'm gonna start over in this corner. I'm going to pick up some of that purple, the reddish purple we've made here. And remember, this is a pretty dark background. So you want to make sure that those colors are nice and watery. And again, I know I'm going to have to go back over, and we'll have to do one more layer after this and get the darkest values that we can everywhere. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean off this edge. Okay, now let's go ahead and move that water around. Nope, went a little bit too too far, so be careful. It should be very watery and drippy, just like what we're seeing. If your color is not moving around, then you probably don't have enough water and color on the paper. So I'm just picking up some of the drip or some of the runs. One more down here. Right there too. Sometimes it's more helpful to make it kind of pointy. And then there we go. And then just pick up that color. See, even without me doing much, it's already getting just a beautiful, gorgeous dark value. Look at that. I'm actually going to use this brush. I don't feel like we got enough in these areas. Boy, that's another thing. Mix up more color than you think you're going to need. Okay, let me put that down. So I'm definitely going to have to go with some darker color right on the bottom on the next layer. But you can see how all those lighter areas are kind of coming through and making it have a value change so it doesn't look flat. We want little peeps of light to show through. Not too much, but just a few spots here and there. Had a little area, was trying to cover that up a little bit more, and the paint was just not doing what I wanted. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this alone, and we're going to go ahead and dry this. Okay, everything is really dry, and you can see how the color really settled down. It's getting darker, and I feel like I've got some good values. I've got a couple of little lighter areas, and I like that. We've got some yellows, we've got some dark blues, but now what I want to do is I want to get the darkest colors that I can on here. So what I'm going to do, and I already pulled some of the blue in here, and I'm pulling some of the red, so we've got a nice purplish tone. So I don't really need to add any yellow into this, so I'm going to leave this just like this. I think I need to get a little bit more water in here though. Get a little bit more watery. Okay, that's good. So it shouldn't be too thick. I would describe this as almost kind of like a melted ice cream. Okay, so let's get that brush out of there. And this time, because I have a lot of paint on my paper, now before I get started, I want to say this. If you get to this point and you're too scared to continue on and you're really liking how it looks, just leave it. This is great. It is actually pretty dark. So this time, so I don't disturb anything, because now the colors, as we've done 3 layers and it's really dark, those colors now are starting to sit towards the surface of the paper. So I'm going to use my mister to put the water on. So I'm going to get it on there really good, and this way I don't disturb anything. Okay, and now I'm just going to make sure the color moves around. A little bit more. Oop. Let's clean off everything around the edge. There we go. Now it doesn't have anything to move to. Okay, so let's pick up the water along the inside. If you're too nervous to do this, then just use your brush. You will move the color around a little bit at this point, but that's okay because that sometimes works out to your advantage, especially if you didn't get enough water on the paper. This fourth layer of brushing, that will really go far and help smooth out any weird areas. So, okay, so let's let this move around. Look at how nice and wet it is. This is perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give this just a second more to sink in. I actually prefer to use masking tape on my paintings, but it's better to have white when I'm filming, but I actually prefer masking tape. Things don't sink and seep under the tape. Oh, a bit more. See how some of the color is picking up? Not a lot, but there is a little bit. Okay, so let's go back this way. Okay, it's nice and glossy. I'm happy with it. I'm actually gonna keep just a little bit of that extra water on the paper. So now I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna pick up this purple and I'm gonna drop it down. Just a few areas. And especially down in here. I didn't feel like I got that over here dark enough to match with that. And let's get it in this spot too. Okay, I'm going to put that brush down. And again, I'm going to clean off my edges. See, and you don't have to panic if you've got plenty of water on the paper. It'll give you plenty of time to do some cleanup. And then go ahead and lift your board. See how everything's moving? It's moving around. Turning my board carefully. I honestly think this is so far the darkest background I have done teaching. And I finally listened to everybody and said, okay, let's do a really dark one. I've done a lot of my own work, but I feel like everybody has just done so well that it's just, it's time to move on to some more advanced. You know, I hate using the word beginner, intermediate, and advanced. It's a technique like anything. And I think that if you can follow this exactly what I'm doing, you will be successful. See, look at how glossy that is. Look at how wet. That's what you want. That's how you get those papers to move and flow. Okay. All right. I have some, look at that, gorgeous little areas of light. Just perfect. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this dry, and then we're going to see how we look. And if we're good, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to, I think I'm going to start with the leaves and the buds. All right, I feel like the background is done. Now, there are a couple things that I've noticed. I have a couple little areas, teeny tiny little areas where I have a couple of specks of masking fluid, but I'm going to leave those on right now until we get ready to pull the masking fluid off. Now, this is a critical stage for your painting. The only thing I did was a couple of those pieces of masking tape in the middle. I went ahead and I pulled those off. They were just hanging around. These ones on the outside are still stuck pretty well to the masking fluid, so we're just going to leave that alone for now. So one thing I want you to be aware of, this has to be perfectly dry. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer around the edges to completely dry. If you are unsure if this is completely dry, don't try to pull the masking fluid off. If it's even underneath, I'm not even talking about the surface, just underneath, if it feels, or if it is just slightly not completely 100% dry, the minute you start pulling up that masking fluid, you're going to rip these tiny little edges. You're not going to see it till you go to put water, and then you're going to see your background run into your flower. So if you are not quite sure, let it sit for a few hours. Take a break and come back to it again. And I always find this really interesting about paintings is your painting should, if you're using good 300-pound paper, it should go back to being 100% flat. Everywhere this painting is flat, but it still feels a little cool to me. So I'm gonna let it go for a little bit longer, and then I'm gonna come back, and then we'll pull the masking fluid off and we will get started. Okay, the background is completely dry, and I tested a little bit right on this area. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull all the masking fluid up. Now, I'm gonna use this little rubber pickup tool. If you don't have one of these, you can buy them. They come in a package of like 2 or 3. I think I've had this one, I don't know, 15 years maybe. But it just helps you grab on to the edge of the masking fluid, and then you can start pulling it up. Now, the thing is, if you are having a hard time, and I think I mentioned this when I was doing the masking, it should be stretchy. You should be able to pull it, and it should come up in relatively one piece. I mean, not completely. And when you're in smaller areas, of course, it's a little bit more difficult to get it to pull up. But if you don't have enough masking fluid on there, it will be very, very difficult. You can already see one little area where I didn't have a whole lot of masking fluid. It's just a little bit more difficult to get up in that little area. Now, if you have color, if you have paint on your masking fluid, which that will happen, be really careful, because when you pull it up, it's going to crack and it's going to fall off the masking fluid, and it will land on your painting. So be careful not to touch around and just flip it over and hit the back of it, and then that should get off any extra flakes of color. See how that is just pulling? That's what you want. The thicker it is, the easier it's going to be to pull. Now this is pretty... I've got the tape on here, so of course that's going to affect it. So I'm just going to lift up a piece of tape, and then I can just keep going. And that's how you know that you did a good job and you got plenty of masking fluid down. Okay, so I'm just going to use that piece of tape right there. And whoo, nothing. I was really kind of worried about that. Okay. So anyhow, I'm just going to go around and I'm going to keep lifting masking fluid. And yeah, and then we're going to be able to start, and I'm going to start on the all the buds around. Technically, there are no leaves unless you count the what surrounds the buds. I guess that kind of is a leaf, because that's what it kind of turns into. Okay, so yep, here we go. I'm just going to go ahead and finish this up, and in the next lesson, we're going to be doing all the buds and this bud behind the main flower.